Yeah.
All right. Good evening. It is 6:30. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you all. I would actually like to start this meeting off a little bit differently. Many of you know that we lost an eagle a week and a half ago. And so I'd like for everyone to take a moment of silence just to honor that individual, honor that student, and really show our support as a community. right, thank you all. Item 1B, approval of agenda and items for discussion.
I move that the agenda for the September 18th, 2023 regular meeting be approved and that policy be set aside, allowing item 1E, call for the public, to be moved to item 1F.
Support. Motion by Mrs. Coleman, support by Mrs. Shaw. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Gogolewski.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw.
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman.
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Bondiel.
Yes.
And I am a yes, that motion passes. Item 1C, approval of minutes from the August 21st, 2023 regular meeting. I move that the meeting minutes of the August 21st, 2023 regular meeting be approved. Support. Motion by Mrs. Shaw, support by Mr. Costa. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Gogolewski.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw. Yes. Mrs. Coleman.
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Bondiel.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, that motion passes. Item 1D, superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. We'll start tonight. I did ask Mr. Minsker to come and speak on behalf of two subjects, one being our new STEM program we have that is now K-8, and also to talk about our state assessment scores from spring of 2023. So Mr. Minsker, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'll have Colin Costello, our science instructional coach, and Annette McFarland, our math instructional coach, to come up. These two have been super important with us building our STEM programs. We started with K, you guys all know this already, but K-4 in our elementary schools. Huge success. The things that our students are doing is phenomenal at such a young age. And then to bridge that gap before they get to high school, we introduced this year for the first time our STEM elective at farms and our STEM elective at the middle school. So they're going to talk about kind of how, we look at the curriculum department, we always look at how things scaffold up to make sure that students starting at kindergarten can build those skills up to when they get to high school. So they go on the track that they want to do academically. And I'll have these guys talk about what we have planned. K-8 or K-7.
Too fast. So we all know that STEM is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So when we went into planning the units for K-4 we started this a little over 2 years ago. We started with the technology piece of coding, getting our kindergartners coding, which is amazing. And then we've moved them up through a different variety of robots. We've integrated women with tech from the high school who have come down to the elementary school buildings to do after school activities. We've been able to integrate different science investigations and different math embedded into that, as well with engineering and design. So the thing about STEM with K-4 is we wanted to do things that they wouldn't be able to do in a normal classroom. So if you look at like the one science picture, we actually had giant tubs of water and the kids were investigating how trash ended up on the beach. So we started with a phenomenon and then they had to just investigate that. So they had these giant tubs of water, pool noodles, and they were pushing them in the water, making big waves, little waves, trying to figure out all the different ways that would create that trash to move along the water. We've done different sorts of cars, powered by wind. We've done egg carts to make sure that they had to re-engineer them so that their egg wouldn't crack in the end. So all sorts of good things that we couldn't normally do in a classroom.
On the other side there, you have their coding and stuff. So that's one of our robots for our younger ones. You can see the squares too. So they're thinking algorithmically and how to put things in sequence. So you see the student is trying to get the bot to kind of navigate that little course she has set up. And then at the higher levels, they obviously get more complex, which is leading us into farms. So our K-4 buildings actually have something called Sphero, which is that little circle robot. that has a gyroscope in it. And so 5-6 uses it as well because you can kind of level it up. So you can see there the screen of the block coding that would be used. It has tons of sensors. It can bump into things. And recently, and probably on its way right now, they're shipping to us that other picture in the corner, something called Blueprint that can integrate with it or be its own separate entity where they can make things like cranes and trusses. So you can get into that engineering. What's really cool about it, though, is it can be put together and taken apart within a single class period. So they can really get into, it's not just hands-on, but getting their minds thinking iteratively about that design process. And not having to spend too much time cutting and gluing and things like that.
And-
that our younger ones.
And we
sometimes
look
get
at
caught
stuff
up
that
on.
would be long lasting, reusable, not create that legacy cost to it. So with this, they can put it together, break it apart. They can create a hand crank windmill. They can put the Sphero into it to create the speed of the windmill. So there's a lot of things that they get to do with that.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. As you go up and things get more complicated, STEM starts to become more and more integrated. So like I said, the blueprint can be attached to Sphero in certain ways. So you can start to integrate the coding with the engineering. Likewise, the top corner there, that student's taking apart just a simple wind-up toy, but starting to figure out like what is actually going on inside of it. Thinking about force and motion and energy and how is that conserved and transferred into things like potential and kinetic. But the back end of that is then they have to engineer their own. So we're starting to kind of get those things merged together where it's not just investigating, you're also applying it into an engineering. And of course, our 7th graders this year are going to get into a way more complex version of that. So you can see 2 pictures there. One is actually from our high school. They use something called Lego Mindstorm that integrates building as well as the coding. And the coding can be in JavaScript, I believe, JavaScript or Python. Or block coding. So depending on the kids' acumen with coding, which by the time they're here, after going through all of this, they'll be pretty proficient. And then on the other picture there, you see the new things we've got in Lego Spike. That's what our 7th grade will be able to do. So you can see that's like a breakdancing man. So they have to both build and code these things and sometimes debug them as they get into those issues. So it's going to be really cool that by the time they're in 7th grade, they will have been doing what our high school is currently doing. Which opens the door to a lot of stuff at the high school.
We worked a lot with Ann Hasselt at the high school, who does an intro to programming class with the whole goal of eventually eliminating that class. So we want our kindergarten starting with coding, and these kids are going to have all those years of these technology skills. We're going to end up getting rid of some of our basic level classes up at the high school and be able to expand above and beyond. So we got everybody on board with this, from CTE, Asamacher, everybody, to see like, how do we scaffold this? How do we build our kids so that by the time they're in high school, they can go even further?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. And we just have such dynamic STEM teachers. If you reach out to our buildings and students, you'll hear how excited they are. We know when it first kicked off the ground, it started to compete a little bit with gym in the K4 space as being the favorite, because kids love to build, they love to do these things. And just the grit, the stamina, and the thinking that kids have, not just anecdotally, but we're starting to see that kind of translate back into academic courses too. We know that schools that have these types of programs around the state see not just obviously these great experiences, but we can measure that. It's measurable gains on things like MSTEP and PSAT. So it's pretty exciting all around, the impact that this will have as we continue to do this.
It's a great example that some of you saw on our tour, I think last year, the year before, and this sticks in my head when I talk to people about our STEM program. But I think it was the 2nd or 3rd grade classroom building cars with popsicle sticks and an egg and rubber bands. And they had to go down this chute, and it went to the wall, and it crashed into the wall, and the egg couldn't break. And they're trying it, they're going, didn't break, it was working. The last car goes down and the egg flies out, hits the wall, splatters. Immediately a boy says, I know what the problem is. Took the car, ran into the lab and started putting it back together and fixing it so it would work. And they figured out the reasons why by how that egg moved and where it went. And you look at it and go, wow, these are kids in elementary school are learning these skills. By the time they get to high school and beyond, they're going to be so much farther ahead.
They're learning that it's okay to fail, because if you fail, then you can go back and try again.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. But I mean, we're open to questions if you guys are curious about anything.
And I want to thank Colin and Annette. They're fantastic, as you can tell. They're personable. They work great with our teachers, and they're excited about the work that we're doing.
I do have a question.
Mhm.
So as far as like prep or the things that you guys are doing with the kids and all of these items, is there like something that's set or you guys make them up? Like, how do you come up with those designs and things that you're challenging? the kids
Combination of
with?
both, actually. So there's a lot of, because STEM's obviously a pretty hot topic right now, right? Everyone likes it. And so there's a lot of curriculums that are out there. We try and vet them, like what are the most high quality ones, but we also have, like we said, some really dynamic teachers that can create those. So for instance, in the K4 space, they get them for a week. So we kind of do like, here's this sort of theme or focus of the week. So it might be science, it might be engineering. So code.org leads us in the coding space, right? And then we might pick up Sphero, which has their own sort of lessons that guide us. In the science space, we have things like STEM Picture Perfect. So it starts off with some sort of engaging reading, but then kind of gets them and scaffolds them through lessons. So we try and turn to a lot of different things that have been vetted as good, high quality stuff.
And it was a collaboration between all of us, you know, like Colin and I kind of led the way, but without our STEM teachers, like, yeah, I want to try this, let's try that, you know, and we just kind of built it along the way with them. So like the first year was definitely trial and error, and then we were able to refine it. And from there, we were able to be like, okay, now that we know K4's good, steady, everybody's getting the same experience across the board. Now, how do we keep that going? And how do we build upon that?
Okay, so like I'm all about trial and error and learning from, critical thinking skills in that direction. How do you grade something like that?
We have to ask our STEM teachers that.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's up to them, the buildings and things like that. Usually electives have their own kind of methods and stuff, but yeah, they would have their own kind of personal grading stuff. Across the buildings like K4, for instance, they use a 3-2-1 scale and stuff. Are you proficient? For instance, on that progress report, there's like an engineering skill set, there's a science skill set, and there's a tech skill set. So are they proficient in those?
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Good job, thank you.
I have a quick question. Is there any kind of competition that you run between classes maybe, or something to, not that you form a whole league like our robotics team, but competition between classes at all?
Not that I know of.
Currently, no, because of the way it's set up. So when a teacher has, say, just third grade, they have just that third grade for an entire week, just fourth grade for that entire week. So it's not like they're swapping classes every other day to be able to do that with the way the schedule's set up.
Not to say it's not possible. I mean, there could be some after school events and things like that, but yeah.
But we have, like, with the women in tech coming down and hosting some of the events, they have done some of that stuff after school.
Great,
Mhm.
thank you.
This is phenomenal. Thank you guys for your work on
Yeah,
this.
thank you, guys.
It's, I'm seeing the growth in 2 kids that I have within the district, and they love STEM, and you're right. I think it's right up there with gym now. They're coming home and excited, and so this is phenomenal. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. And then finally, I've been reporting here at the board table. I know Chuck has sent something else to the community. I've forwarded scores to you guys over the last bunch of months. We're finally wrapping up our last spring testing because things keep coming out and we're getting more data. And during our tours that we've been doing at our staff meetings to talk to our teachers about how we did and what our next steps are, I thought I'd kind of give you that spiel that I give them, because I kind of looked at this data from a big picture on how we did across the state and how across the county compared to past years. And what I'll say is that at the curriculum department, we are always trying to look at it from how we're scaffolding from K-12. Because the buildings focus on what they're doing in their particular grades in their buildings, and I look at things from a 5-mile up K-12, how do we get kids college and career ready by the time they leave us? So everything that happens in kindergarten has an impact on where those kids are by the time they leave us. And so that 11th grade SAT is super, super important for us as a district, because that's where we stay. When those kids walk across the stage, they walk in the real world, they have to be college and career ready. So how can we make sure that bridge is being made K-12 all the way through? So these scores and all of the distractions and all this stuff with COVID and all the things that we've been dealing with the last 4 years or so, the fact that we ended up the way we did with some of these numbers was kind of unheard of a little bit. And I wanted to make sure that the staff knew that, which is why I talk about it during their meetings. So for M-STEP specifically, so I'm kind of go by one. For M-STEP specifically, we increased from a year ago in 14 of the 16 testing areas. I'm not sure that's happened before. That's the first time. For M-STEP, we averaged 10% higher increases than the county. So our scores rose by average across all the M-STEP scores, 10% average higher than where the county did. And the county actually either plateaued or declined in a lot of areas. So on the areas where where the county increased, a lot of that was because of Hartland scores. So that was good to see. For PSAT and SAT, we increased from a year ago in 7 out of 8 testing areas. I'm not sure that's ever happened. That's the first time. For PSAT and SAT, we're the only district in the county to finish first or second in every testing category. So no other school in the county finished first or second in the county in every single testing area. We're the only ones there. For M-STEP, PSAT, and SAT, we increased or stayed the same in 21 of 24 testing areas. So in every single testing area, we increased in 21 out of 24. For M-STEP, PSAT, and SAT, we were above state average in every testing area, and we were above county average in every testing area. And the big one for me is in all the testing areas that we had in the spring, over half of our testing areas, so 54%, were either the highest or the second highest score we've ever had. And that's coming off of 3 really tough years, trying to get kids caught back up. And I talked a lot about how, you know, every school in the state took a step back because of COVID, 3 steps back. And we had to try to build ourselves back up again. And we get to the point where we either had the first or second highest score ever in those testing areas is a tribute to our staff, to our principals, our culture that we have in Hartland in our buildings, whether it's academic, whether it's social emotional, all those things all tie together to get our kids ready to learn. So I'm proud of the entire district and the work that we did. I will say that, like, no matter how good we do, we have room to grow in every single area. And we have a plan for those things, and we're gonna work on those plans and try to get better next year.
You have any questions, Dave?
I do have a quick one, so good job, everybody, that's terrific news. What took so long for them to provide the outcome of the tests? Like you were
Good
saying,
question.
they hung on to it, why?
Good question. The state, I think, they embargo all the data to make sure it's all right. And it's not until the mysschooldata.org website, that website that has all the data in it, when they release that to the public, they send us an email and they say, okay, it's on embargo. And it's always late.
Oh, so
Summer.
is this typical?
Typical.
Oh, okay, I thought this
Yeah.
year was different, but good job.
No.
So thank you for the update.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's actually early. There are many years we don't get
This is
the data until October. Yeah, we're already 2 months into the school year. That's just normally how it is, so. Thank you, Dave. Thank you to our staff, and we continue to talk about us as a school district being a really good school district. We've talked, I know I've talked with the board members many times on the old adage of good to great, a book by Jim Collins, but we go by the adage of good to better, and we continue to get better. And this is a good example of here we are back to where we were pre-COVID, and our kids are performing well. And that doesn't happen by itself. It certainly doesn't happen because of us. It happens because of our people that are on the ground floor working with our kids every single day, all day long. So we appreciate everything that everybody does. Moving from there, I do want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to our high school esports team. For those that don't know, we created a new extracurricular for our high school students called esports, and these students game, believe it or not, yes, they game. While they might game at home, they also game as a team at the high school. And their first go around, they did very well. There was some social media information out there. If you follow Hartland Schools on Facebook or Twitter, you'll see that information. Parents can, the community can join and watch what's happening via social media. So you can go online. They opened the room for those that want to come and watch the kids participate. But what's really cool about this is, on average, on a normal year at the high school, so we have about 17 to 1,800 students at the high school. At one time, we had a few more. We have about between 71 and 78% participation rate. That means 71 to 78% of our students are involved in some extracurricular activity at the high school. That's pretty phenomenal. We track that data yearly and we look at that, and it doesn't hurt to have over 200 students in the band, and Rachel, your daughter's in the band and participating and meeting students. This gives our students, I think there's 28 students, I think I was told, that are currently involved in this. Those are 28 students we might not have had in the past that now have a connection to school, have a reason for getting up every day and going to school, motivated because they have to keep their grades up, they have to have their attendance in good order, they have to follow all the extracurricular expectations for participation. So one more avenue to capture students and engage them in school. And so we're excited about that, and the coaches and the work that we're doing. So I just want to give them a shout out and look forward to seeing how they're doing. Lastly, Mr. Marino was not able to be with us tonight, but I do want to talk a little bit about our bond update. Just a reminder to the community, we did a lot of work this past summer. We are in punch list mode at our Ore Creek High School and Farms, just finishing up little things, painting and little things that have to be adjusted. Our athletic complex has come along quite substantially. I've been playing games out at the main stadium. Our baseball softball complex, if you get a chance, go on and drive around the backside of the high school. You'll see a new restroom area. You'll see that they're putting up press boxes. We'll have a press box, a new press box on the soccer field. A lot of good things happening out there. For 2024, the summer, usually, again, we have to do all this work in about a 50 to 54 day window. We're looking currently right now at how we're going to approach the summer season. We have a company that's reassessing all of our roofs, so we know what roofs we need to touch. We originally had roofs in the bond, but since then, since it's been 5 years now, since we originally went to Treasury, some roofs might be in worse order than others, so we'll make a determination on what roofs we'll touch at the high school, Creekside Farms, and this building, as well as replacing the entire roof at our 51 Child Care Center. Replacing select parking lots around the high school and the stadium area, we still have that work to do. We're looking at the new team room out at the main stadium and what we can do, and if we're going to be able to afford to do that. As you know, the bond, while we projected and budgeted for certain projects, things haven't been so friendly in the building world as far as costs. So we have to assess that, and we'll get that bid out so that we can see what that would cost to do that. Our tennis courts, we do have to replace our east tennis court set. There's 2 courts there that are heaving. We have that set to be bid out to see what we have to do to replace the 2 tennis courts and then resurface all of those tennis courts, bring them up to snuff. Replacing boilers at Creekside is on the list. HVAC, the entire HVAC system at 51, as well as the domestic pipelines at 51 building. The building was built in 1951. That's why we call it the 51 building. So there's work that has to be done there. And of course, the last thing that we're looking at is lighting around the district. And using sinking fund dollars to revamp the swimming pool. Cleaning it, painting it, redesigning it. The stairs have to be redesigned because it's cost prohibitive to replace the stairs as they are currently. We just can't imagine spending the kind of money we've been quoted on to replace that. So we've got a company that's redesigning that space. It looks like maybe April, we'll shut the pool down for a couple months to do all the work in the pool and get it all done at one time. So we have a lot of work coming, and just keep abreast, watch our website, and we'll keep everybody up to date on what's happening. So that's the bond. So ends the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Item 1E, new hire.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, offers a probationary teaching contract to Amy Bruce for the 2023-24 school year at the Step 5 MA salary track pending verification of credentials and Public Acts 99, 83, and 189 requirements if applicable.
Motion by Mrs. Coleman, support by Mrs. Shaw. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Bogalewski,
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw. Yes. Mrs. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Keller,
Yes.
Mrs. Blondell.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, that motion passes.
You guys color code?
We did, yeah, thank you. Good evening, how we doing? Super excited this evening to introduce you to Miss Amy Bruce. Amy's joined us a couple weeks ago. We had a last minute resignation, and Amy was a great applicant for us, came and interviewed and did an outstanding job and has joined in team teaching Algebra 2, Geometry, and global studies, as well as teaching a math intensive class. And has just been a great addition. One thing that we love about Amy is her experience, wide range of experience in both public schools, private schools, online schools, across K through 12. So has some great experience, very organized, great at designing IEPs to best support our kids. So we are just blessed to have Amy, and pleased to introduce you to her.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm really excited to be here, part of Hartland and part of all those wonderful things that we've already heard at the beginning of the meeting.
All right. Moving on to item 1F, call to the public. Speakers are asked to express themselves in a civil manner. We do have Deputy Chuck here tonight with us. There will be a very low threshold for people that cannot act like adults in the audience. This is your warning. So please respect those individuals who are speaking. If I have to stop that individual to address someone in the audience, you will be asked to leave. In addition to that, please make sure that all of your comments are addressing the board, and we will move forward in the fashion that we have. It will be a 3-minute time limit, and I will hold up the yellow piece of paper. We have 30 seconds left just as a visual so that you can wrap up your conversation. Our first speaker is Ms. Barbara Togovich.
Thank you once again for letting me come and speak. Tonight I want to talk about communism, socialism, and somebody who had experience in it. This is quoting from this individual. As a survivor of the communist Holocaust, I am horrified to witness how my beloved America, my adopted country, is gradually being transformed into a secularist and atheistic utopia where communist ideals are glorified and promoted while Judeo-Christian values and morality are ridiculed and increasingly eradicated from the public and social conscience of our nation. Under the decades-long assault and militant radicalism of many so-called liberal and progressive elites, God has been progressively erased from our public and educational institutions to be replaced with all manner of delusion, perversion, corruption, violence, decadence, and insanity. Sounds like mental health insanity. It is no coincidence that as Marxist ideology and secularist principles engulf the culture and pervert mainstream thinking, individual freedoms and liberties are rapidly disappearing. As a consequence, Americans feel increasingly more powerless and subjugated by some of the most radical and hypocritical, least democratic, and characterless individuals our society has ever produced. Those of us who have experienced and witnessed firsthand the atrocities and terror of communism understand fully why such evil takes root, how it grows and deceives, and the kind of hell it will ultimately unleash on the innocent and the faithful. Godlessness is always the first step towards tyranny and oppression. Nobel laureate, Orthodox Christian author, and Russian dissident Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Do you people know who that is? And you won't answer me, of course, but you should know who this person is. In his Godless, the First Step to the Gulag, address given when he received the Templeton Prize for Progress in Religion on May of 1983, explained how the Russian Revolution and the communist takeover were facilitated by atheistic mentality in a long process of secularization which alienated the people from God and traditional Christian morality and beliefs. He rightly concluded, men have forgotten God, that's why all this has happened. And this is what's going on in our country. Just educating you on this. Infiltration started at the top of academia with professors, indoctrinating the future teachers. And now it's trickled down to our preschools, and the NEA, Randy Weingart, is mandating to the state what to teach. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Jeff Scott.
Good evening. This evening, the 7 of you will be voting on whether this district is going to be open and transparent with this community or not. I have submitted a FOIA appeal to the board relating to a recent FOIA denial. It involves my inquiry into the district's investigation of sexual assault allegations against a teacher, a felony in the state of Michigan. So let's talk specifics. On a Monday morning, the school district received allegations that an adult male teacher had a long-term sexual relationship with a high school student. Again, a felony in the state of Michigan. Mr. Van Epps and Mr. Hughes jumped into action, and Mr. Van Epps sent Mr. Hughes his 5-point plan to investigate. Number one, he had brainstormed with the principal. Number two, he had a conversation with a person whose name is redacted. Number three, we'll call this the super secret step number 3 that they don't want us to know about. Step 3 was fully redacted. Number 4, he was going to have Mr. Usher start reading through the teacher's emails. And number 5, he was considering meeting with the teacher and the union rep. Probably a bad idea. Mr. Hughes responded within 5 minutes saying, let the police investigate. However, that's not what happened. Mr. Van Epps moved forward with step number 5 in his plan and contacted the teacher before contacting the police. Now, I just think maybe by a show of hands here, how many of you want Mr. Van Epps or Mr. Hughes investigating the sexual assault of your daughter before contacting the police? You can just hold your hand up. And then hiding what he's done behind a FOIA denial. Anybody interested? I don't think so. Now let's talk about that super secret step number 3 that's been completely redacted. I was told by the district this information was protected under attorney-client privilege, and that's why it wasn't released. Unfortunately, communication between 2 bureaucrats is not protected by attorney-client privilege as it relates to the FOIA. Let me read you what our attorney, this is from our Michigan Attorney General. She says, the scope of the privilege is narrow, including only those communications by the client to its advisor that are made for the purpose of obtaining legal advice. The information in this email was neither. Again, it was communication between the 2 of them. The Michigan Supreme Court has also chimed in on this with another school district in Saranac, and they emphasized that attorney-client privilege should be narrowly construed, and the burden of proof rests on the party asserting the exemption, the 7 of you. You have to prove that this is indeed protected speech or protected from the FOIA. So I call on all of you to do the right thing tonight be transparent with this community. More than that, I call on the Hartland administrators to take these things more seriously, not to pretend to be detectives. I'm urging these administrators to start doing the right thing today to protect our children tomorrow.
Next, we have Lisa, and I am so sorry, I'm gonna botch this. Burkhardt.
You just say it fast and don't overthink it. Most of you know me, but I'm the general education social worker at the high school. And I just wanted to shine a spotlight on our administrators. As you mentioned, we had a very tragic loss of life in our student body. And I'm gonna keep it together. But it was really impressive to me as both a parent and as an employee and as a colleague to watch how from all the way from Mr. Hughes down, we all came together. James Fitzgerald has been in his position for a hot minute, and he had this big event and he handled it like such a professional, so much compassion. Immediately, Scott Van Epps, Dave Minsker, Kate Gregory were at the building. It was just all hands on deck. And I don't feel like we talk enough about how phenomenally this team gels together and the respect they give to each other and to the employees that are working under them. And so I just wanted to come here and say thank you to all of them for making my job easier, because when you have great leadership, it's easier to do what you need to do, especially during hard situations. And I also wanted to thank you guys personally. I know I sent an email, but some of you delivered food and you just showed such care and support for us in a way that was just so welcome and so lovely, and I was just so appreciative. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of you.
Next up, we have Lori, and she will need a microphone. Lori, if you give me the okay on the microphone, I'll start the timer so that we don't.
It's on. Okay. My biggest concern about what I wanted to talk about today, since we only get 3 minutes, which again is not fair, where other schools let you speak again. But, what was it? Not this last one, because I was interrupted by the people on Zoom. The meeting before that, I had waited until after the board meeting was done, and I had talked to Chris Koska after he called me out and called me a liar twice about the wooden hammer, which is a gavel, and I just called it a wooden hammer. After the school board meeting, I had approached them and I asked Chris to talk to him, and I did. And I had asked him, Chris, before I send the video out and the proof.
Lori, can you address the board and not name individuals? Thanks so much.
I am addressing the board. I'm talking about Chris Koska.
You can't personally attack individuals on the board.
Yeah, I can. We all do.
No, you can't.
Okay. It's in the Constitution. This is a public hearing, and yes, you can. And I'm talking about what happened. And he called me out and he used my name after the meeting, the board meeting. And then I had confronted him and he admitted the truth that she did do that. He said, but she didn't attack me. And I said, not physically, but she did attack me verbally. And I just wanted to point that out, that that was addressed. And as soon as I got done saying that, he called Deputy Hiller on me. And I said, what are you doing, Chris? What did I do wrong? And then as soon as he did that, he left. So I just want to let you guys know that we have every right to confront any one of you at any time, especially to talk to you about some concerns. And I also wanted to let you guys all know what happened to the high schoolers was totally wrong. That came to all of you guys about the concerns with the safe space stickers, how they don't feel safe and they're concerned, and they were not told that they weren't going to get no help. I told them, in my opinion, that maybe you guys should do something and get a discrimination, because all kids should be treated equal. Transgenders don't have more rights than straights, and straights don't have more rights than transgenders. And another thing I wanted to approach about, I mean, this is ridiculous. During the pandemic, everybody knows now that the governor or the health department, nobody can take our constitutional rights away, and they were all unconstitutional. And every time they said it was the law, it was never the law. You have to go through the legislators, and we all know how long that takes. And to let you guys all know that Diana McCormick admitted on record there was never a county mandate. And all the superintendents in schools were writing their own letters like if there was one. So this whole time, we were told to do something and it was not the law. So next time, if something is the law, show us the evidence, because I know the constitutional rights and nobody followed the law. And if you want to wear a mask, wear one. But just let you know that that was all constitutional, what you did to our children. And a lot of them have damage on their face from wearing one. So thank you.
Next up, we have Jane Merwin.
Hi. Okay, I'm super nervous and I'm not a good speaker, but I will do my best. Huh?
Pull the microphone down.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm just gonna read a section of the Bible. This is Matthew 18, 1 through 10. Jesus explains greatness. At the same time came the disciples unto Jesus, saying, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child unto him and set him in the midst of them, and he said, verily I say unto you, except you be converted and become as a little child, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as a little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And who shall receive one such little child in my name receives me. But whosoever offends one of these little children, which believes in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hung around his neck then drowned in the depths of the sea. Woe unto the world because of the offenses, for it must, it basically says you're better off to cut one arm or one leg off than have both an arm or both arms or both legs in eternal fire. And if your eye offends you, pluck it out and cast it from you. It is better for you to enter life with one eye than to cast two eyes in hellfire. Take heed that you despise not one of these little ones, for I say unto you that in heaven their angels, these children's angels, do also behold the face of the Father which is in heaven. I think that's important for us to remember, that all the little children have angels that watch over them. And I just want to say that I think I don't know if we realize that our Constitution is based on the New and Old Testament. So this book that many probably snicker and think, oh, what's that all about? It's important because that's our Constitution. And other countries are just wish they had a Constitution like we have. And another thing I want to say is in the 30s, Rockefeller hired a man named Alfred Kinsey. He studied pedophilia, and he was actually a pedophile. And he was hired in a long game plan to sexualize children. And I'm just saying, if you don't read about it, then you don't know about it. And I also want to say that I was sexually assaulted in school, in the Hartland schools, back in 1976. I wasn't attacked, but I was approached by a teacher multiple times to have sex with him. I never did, but I'm just telling you, it happens. It was happening in 1976. I guarantee you it's happening now. And
Thank you, Mrs. Marway.
we can't ignore that.
Thank you. Next, we have Holly Naylor.
Good evening, everybody. Just wanted to come and share a positive experience that we have been having at Lakes Elementary. For the LOC Student Run Credit Union, which for anybody who's not familiar with, is an actual like savings account that's open to students and is run by fourth graders, obviously supervised, but they select staff to run the program. We have 3 kids. Our 2 older ones had no interest whatsoever in this program, so I didn't really know about it, but our youngest is a 4th grader now, and the second the application was available, he was pestering me, Mom, we gotta get this in, we gotta get this in. He filled in his own portion by himself. He was interviewed, had to explain why he wanted the position that he wanted, and I will tell you that when he found out that he was in fact appointed as one of the branch managers, he was like thrilled, like next level excitement. He probably won't be as excited in a few months when he no longer wants to do the job and still has to do it, but that will also be a learning experience. So I just wanted to say thank you guys for your creativity and flexibility in offering these kind of alternative ways for kids to learn. About a year ago, he started talking about how he wants to go into business when he's older, and this is an opportunity for him to explore that at the elementary level. Didn't know there was going to be the stuff earlier, but it really does tie into that, you know, working with kids from kindergarten on, encouraging them to explore their options, engaging with some kids in ways that maybe wouldn't work for others. Like I said, 2 weren't interested, 1 is just thrilled. So thank you to the district for providing these opportunities and for your willingness to kind of do things a little differently.
Thank you, Mrs. Naylor. Next, we have Angela Yarber.
Hi, good evening. I would like the board to initiate a change in the way that high school currently releases students for appointments. Last week, my daughter had a doctor's appointment in the morning and I followed the protocol of sending in a note with her, which became her pass. When it was time for her to leave, my daughter walked out of the high school without a staff member having any face-to-face contact with the person picking her up. Luckily, that person was me, but it could have easily been a predator. Our school has close access to M59, US 23, and I-96. With the growth of human trafficking, I think that we need to protect our kids as much as possible. Face-to-face contact with an adult would also make skipping school more difficult for students. Since some parents may not share this concern, perhaps a checkoff waiver could be included at the beginning of the year with the other online forms parents complete that would indicate whether their children could just walk out of the school if a note is sent in, or whether they would prefer a face-to-face checkout. Our children are precious, and schools must have the best procedures in place to protect them. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Yarber. Last, we have Sherry Sekeris.
Good evening. I feel the need to comment on the remarks made last month concerning Julie Ohashi. It's true that she does technically live in Oakland County. However, she is close to the county line and many of the homes surrounding her have taken advantage of school of choice and do attend Hartland schools. I'm sure she feels more a part of Hartland schools than to Huron Valley. Julie is a teacher and to my knowledge has never claimed to be a Hartland teacher. Just because the FBI did not prove that the swastika was a hate crime does not mean that it wasn't. It only meant that they did not have proof that it was. After the incident, word was spread that maybe she made up the whole thing and actually put the swastika on the tree herself. This was the most disgusting slander I have ever heard. I'm sure if something so horrible was done near your home, you would react accordingly. That act was disturbing, disgusting, and frightening. I heard people who don't live in Julie's subdivision say, oh, it was probably just kids being kids. Yet you're up in arms when a child makes threats at school, not being kids then. My point is all events need to be taken seriously because we never know the true intent. Mrs. Ohashi's husband has brown skin. When their family was attending a picnic in Howell, a man riding in a pickup truck yelled at her husband, I hate the N-word. Maybe you don't consider him dark enough to be a minority, but this person certainly did. If your family had to hear these words yelled at them in front of the public and your young son, and then a swastika was painted or burned into a tree adjacent to your home, I'd like to see your reaction. To nitpick and attack someone who clearly cares about the safety and well-being of our youth is pathetic, and to call Mrs. Ohashi a liar is not looking at the big picture. I can tell you that the people who live in her subdivision were hurt, disgusted, and frightened by that incident, and also by the stealing of pride flags numerous times, right off houses, then burned at the community beach and the flagpoles thrown into the lake. If you don't think we have haters in our midst who could be dangerous, your head is in the sand. If you're more upset by Mrs. Ohashi than the perpetrators of these acts, I feel you have a serious problem and need to look inward. Your anger is misplaced and your attacks pathetic. The recent hate messages scrawled on a Brighton school parking lot further shows that hate is alive and well in Livingston County. This board's lack of desire to protect our LGBTQ community is shameful. The message you sent by removing the safe space stickers has been received loud and clear. The more discussion from both sides should have taken place before the stickers were removed. You've emboldened the haters, which appears to be your intent. I'm worried about our LGBTQ community. I wish you were. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Moving on to item 1G, board reports and requests. Again, I request that we make sure that we stay consistent with what is impacting our district and impacting the students, staff, administration. If we have issues with one another personally, please keep those out of the board table. And let's get started. Mr. Goloski, you want to kick us off?
Sure, thank you, Megan. Just want to say congrats to all of the teaching staff for some of the numbers that were thrown out earlier by Mr. Minsker and Mr. Hughes. That's very, very good news, and that's something that we need to pat ourselves on the back for, and just a tremendous job by all the teachers that have worked so well with our students. I do appreciate that. Everyone up here appreciates that. Another item, and not to be too much on the downside, this was mentioned earlier, we did lose an eagle this month, and just so everyone can kind of reiterate this to all of their friends and family, I was reminded this morning in a personal email that was sent by my insurance company. It was dealing with a webinar in how to spot people with conditions that may lead to suicide and such. And there are a number of free webinars and programs like that. And you don't realize something is out there until something affects you. And then you begin to notice. But just for everyone out there, whether you're a student, there are counselors here to talk to. If you're a parent of a student here, there are plenty of options available. And we have to remind each other from time to time that there are resources available to talk to about issues and problems. And hopefully we can curb the tide of some of these experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bobolesky. Mrs. Shaw? Thank you. My last plug for Hartland Art Walk is this month. Our event is Saturday, 11 to 4, Settlers Park. Food vendors, we have music. We have almost 150 pieces of art. We have about 90 in the open category, and then the rest make up student. It's amazing to see what our students have submitted. And I'm hopeful what this will look like in the future. You will be able to find art all over the community, businesses. HeartlandLiving.com will have all of the information about where you'll be able to go and visit to see the art between September 23rd and then October 7th. So that's up and coming this weekend. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. Mrs. Coleman.
I just wanted to share another positive experience. One of my sons is in the band at the middle school, and every year the middle school band members get to participate in band night at the high school. And it's a totally, obviously, a new experience for middle schoolers and for parents of middle schoolers to know what is involved in a game night at the high school. And it was a blast. We had a great time. Sam had a blast, and I hope that he is sold and will continue on in high school. But it was great. The staff did a fabulous job. The parent volunteers did amazing, feeding almost 300 kids in less than an hour. And it was really all run very smoothly, and it was a great experience and a great game. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Coleman. Mr. Costa.
Thank you, Mrs. Kleebach. So kind of in light of how our last meeting played out, I felt it important to kind of reflect. And again, I don't normally write a lot down, but I did type this up. And I recently babysat my 5 and 3-year-old niece and nephew. And we went to a playground by their house. And on the playground, there was a sign that had these simple rules. It was titled 4 Simple Rules. 1, we don't say anything unkind or untrue. 2, we take responsibility for our actions. 3, we're respectful of everyone. And 4, we take care of our school and play equipment. So as I read them, I thought to myself, and I've been thinking about this for over a month now, how wonderful it would be if our Board of Education could simply attempt to abide by these simple playground rules. Rule 1, don't say anything unkind or untrue. Since January, some board members have gone out of their way, either intentionally or unintentionally, to say unkind or untrue things about members of this board, or HCS staff, or members of our community. Rule 2, take responsibility for our actions. Because just last month, when a board member up here decided to post on their social media, which is their private, their right, about an image of children holding a swastika flag and an image of children holding an LGBTQ flag, somehow implying that they're the same. This post brought so much attention and backlash that the Livingston Daily did an article about this. In my opinion, the lack of forethought on that post shows more harm than it can cause, and it disgusts me. Rule 3 was be respectful of everyone. This is playground rules. So out of respect to my fellow board members that have attempted to rise above this ridiculous behavior, I will move on from the rule, but if you need examples of disrespectful behavior, you're welcome to go back and watch any of these meetings from January to today. And then rule 4, so it talks about we take care of our school and our playground or our play equipment. If members of this board cared about the schools, then why are their behaviors and actions not showing it? Instead, we have stories on social media posts, inappropriate conversations, appalling behavior, quite frankly, at board meetings. These actions can and will lead to changing culture here in Hartland, and not in a good way. Administrators will leave. Look at Brighton. Just recently, 2 central office administrators left due to the toxic culture that the board is creating. We have fabulous teachers here in Hartland. Fabulous teachers. They're going to leave if we allow inappropriate behavior of some current board members to go unchecked. In my opinion, saying nothing is saying these behaviors are acceptable and okay, and simply said they're not. So I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I want to state that I continue to stand by the belief that it's important to respect the inherent dignity of everyone. I will continue to do everything I can to create an environment that is safe and welcoming, in which everyone feels represented. I'm not going to waver from my efforts to create a school culture that supports a diverse, equitable, and inclusive educational community. With that, I'm all set.
Thank you, Mr. Fetzer. Mr. Keller.
Thank you, Ms. Kleebach. Again, just echo some of my sentiments from my fellow colleagues up here. My condolences to the family of the fallen Eagles. So we're very sad for family and the friends and the entire community. So again, our thoughts and prayers are with the family of the child. On a positive note, I did want to just, we had some great news with the academic side. I'll just highlight a couple things on the athletic side, and that one being is the girls equestrian team. Congratulations to them for a district championship. And I also understand that for the third year in a row now they have won a sportsmanship award, which could be equally as impressive as the district championship itself. And then lastly, I want to just give a quick shout out to both the middle school boys and girls cross-country teams for their excellent finishes at the White Pine Hawk International, which is in Saginaw, Michigan. The girls got first place and the boys finished second. So congratulations to all of those teams and everyone who participated. Next, I do want to just quick shout out. I know neither of them are here, but to Ms. Cheney and Mrs. Brisky for their hospitality. So as part of the project that we recently enacted with the advocate program with administration and the school board, I had an opportunity to go visit farms, which for those that don't know is 5 and 6 school, but it was a great experience. I think we have a fantastic staff there. And I know Ms. Cheney and Mrs. Brisky do a great job. And then I guess lastly, with respect to a previous board report, I guess I hope that this individual takes into consideration that sometimes as president, you have an opportunity to set the tone for how others, maybe that are newer members on the board, are received. And when one of your first actions is to censure other members, I think that does speak loudly when it comes to reflecting upon whether or not you had any impact or influence into the atmosphere. I think that needs to be stated. And that ends my board report.
Thank you, Mr. Keller. Mrs. Montiel.
Thank you. Yeah, I echoed sentiment. I said great job on the report outs for the students, the academics and STEM programs. So great job. I don't think we fail to say great job quite often to the teachers, but for some reason we're always told that we don't say that. So why don't you pay attention to actions versus what people are saying? It's kind of like throwing a rock at someone and then running away saying that you got hit with a rock. So in my mind, kids come first in the school. The only reason we're here is because of kids. Yes, we need to protect teachers and their rights. But everything I do and everything I say is regarding what I feel is best for the kids. And I'm hoping that the people that voted for me see that. I think that being told that there's appalling behavior up here and kind of like lumping everybody into that's disappointing at best. I disagree with it wholeheartedly. And then saying that things are disgusting, but yet I don't think I've ever used that term against anybody up here. So it's kind of ironic. Okay, so that's what I need to say about that. I agree with Mrs. Yarber. I think that it would be cool if we had some kind of a form that just told told the administration that it's okay if your child comes out, when you want to pick them up. It's totally fine. Some parents are okay with that. And then other parents may not want that. So I do think that maybe we should work on something like that. So I support what Mrs. Yarber said, and I agree completely because 600,000 children disappear in the United States every year. We are constantly talking about, small groups of, individuals or things that are not as large scale as human trafficking. And I really think that we need to focus a little bit more on reality of things. And we're talking about fentanyl. Once every 11 minutes, a student dies or a person dies of fentanyl. Why don't we ever hear about drugs or anything like that? Because we need to educate our kids on that. Like I said, human trafficking, the statistics are real. 600,000 children, but we don't hear about it, but you can look it up. And you got to wonder, why aren't we talking about that? Why aren't we focusing on big picture things that really can affect our children? because a lot of people don't know about it. So I would really like to focus on things like that. Things that are not social actions, but versus like legitimate safety. This is safety for the children. This is their livelihood, their lives. The other thing I want to talk about is I had recently been introduced to Buck Mears. And Buck Mears is the father of Tate Mears. He was one of the victims in the Oxford shootings. Incredible man. Out of the whole thing, he and his wife have taken it upon themselves to start 42 Strong in Tate's name. And what that is they started a mentorship program in Oxford schools, and there's 400 kids in it right now. And it sounds, I'm finding more out about it. But I do think that is something that we should visit, and I would like to get Mr. Mears in here to talk, because he is extremely focused on mental health. And we all know that there's some issues with mental health that we really need to help our students with. So I'm looking forward to linking up with him and finding out what his strategy is, because they do have 400 kids in their mentorship program. And I just feel that there are a lot of kids that do slip through the cracks that may not need psychological help. Maybe they just need an older student to say, hey, you're all right, you know, like things are gonna be okay, like just hold tight, like, you know, give just, you know, a little direction. So I'm really looking forward to that. And if you ever want to cry, look it up. Buck Mears spoke at the Capitol last week, and you just can't imagine how he could get through the speech, because he quoted his son, which is quite amazing. So with that said, I do think there's some, you know, great things going on. I think, you know, there's a lot of positive things. We heard a lot of positive things about the security officers, a lot of positive things. So I'm very pleased about that. So I always pass that along. And I'm looking forward to other big, good things happening in Hartland as well. And one of those would be educating people on fentanyl and human trafficking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Blondell. As for my report, I do want to start by acknowledging the staff and the administration at the high school. What we saw from you guys from an action standpoint to really create a community and essentially create a hug around our high school students as they were experiencing something so tragic was phenomenal. I think within 5 minutes of the conversation that came to me, there was a fully fledged plan to enact a team, a plan to support children no matter what they needed, and a plan to make sure our teachers and staff were supported. So kudos to you guys for doing that, and kudos to Mr. Fitzgerald. You know, 1 month in, not even 1 month into the role, and is dealing with something like that and did it with such poise. I also want to thank the board. I think everyone up here was ready to jump in and do whatever was needed, and whatever was needed to support the family. And so thank you all for being so open and kind with that. I do want to quickly recap something that the community might not be aware of, but I had a discussion with Mr. Keller very briefly before the board meeting around our hiring practices. So some of you might be aware, and you hear that we approve all of our new hires. They come up, we vote on them, they're introduced by their principal, their building principal, and we move forward. Given that their actual contractual agreement is with the board, that is something that we do need to continue. There's been some discussion back and forth on, you know, whether the board would participate in that, and there will be continued discussion going on in the future. What we did find out in addition to that was actually, if we did choose to participate, that would be in an open meeting. Sounds pretty daunting to me if I was someone coming in as a teacher. So just trying to be transparent with you all that's why we continue to approve of those. We are the ones that hold the contract. So for some of you that might have confusion, in some meetings we have 10 and others we have none. And so just wanted to be transparent with that. I do also want to acknowledge our school resource officers. I have a child at Village, and there was a recent post of Mr. Stan playing clapping games with the students and doing some other things, and the comments that came back from the parents were phenomenal. When they showed that picture to their children, the response was often, hey, that's my buddy, or that's my friend, or that's Mr. Stan, he's so awesome. it was just really great to hear that. It was also really great actually, and I have to acknowledge this, that a parent who perhaps maybe was a little bit confused as to why we might have made those moves in the district, had an opportunity to talk to Mr. Stan and kind of was able to get his viewpoint on what he's doing in the schools. And so it kind of reiterated our goal of making sure that our students are safe. And certainly thank you to our deputy that's here tonight, going above and beyond his role at the high school to make sure that our board meetings go smooth and seamlessly. Shout out to them. One last thing, and this is a plug for those of you who have known me, but we are getting ready to launch into our Adopt a Family program through the Hartland Optimist Club. We have about 350 to 400 students, children that participate in that program through the holidays. If you are interested in participating, donating, running a drive through your sports team, your church, anything, please let me know. We have lots of needs and we essentially support our students through the holiday. In addition to that, we support a holiday meal and then some items to make sure that they have sustainable food items to get through the Christmas break. If you're interested, please reach out. Other than that, that ends my report. Moving on to item 2A, payment of invoices.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Chief Financial Officer, approves the financial report as of August 31st, 2023, and the payment of invoices totaling $4,470,692.61, and payroll obligations totaling $3,746,642.73.
Motion by Mrs. Coleman, support by Mrs. Shaw. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Bogoleski.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw. Yes. Mrs. Coleman.
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Blondell.
Yes.
I'm a yes, that motion passes. Item 2B, 2023-24 HCS district goals.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, approves the 2023-24 district goals as presented.
Motion by Mr. Costa, support by Mrs. Coleman. Any discussion?
Just one question on the district goals. How flexible are these in terms of being able to add or subtract in the future?
Well, I think practice is that we get an update, generally speaking, towards the end of the first semester. Is that correct? And so if we need to course correct at that point, I think that would be the time. If there's feedback as to ways we can improve something, for example, I would recommend that you have that conversation sooner rather than later, just so it's on the docket.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Bogoleski.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw. Yes. Mrs. Coleman.
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Blondell.
Yes.
And I am a yes, that motion passes. Item 2C, student nutrition contract extension.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent and the chief financial officer, approves the student nutrition contract extension as presented.
Motion by Mrs. Coleman, supported by Mrs. Shaw. Any discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Bogoleski.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw. Yes. Mrs. Coleman. Yes. Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Blondell.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, that motion passes. Item 2D, 8/25/23 FOIA redaction appeal.
I move that the Board of Education denies the FOIA appeal submitted on 8/25/23 and affirms the FOIA coordinator's determination of redacted information for the initial FOIA request submitted on 6/21/23.
Motion by Mrs. Coleman, support by Mrs. Shaw. Any discussion?
I do have a discussion point. So I was able to stop by Mr. Hughes' office and see what was redacted, and I'm still not quite sure why it was redacted. So, you know, I didn't have a chance to talk to Mr. Hughes today to find that out. But in my mind, it didn't strike me as something that should have been redacted. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Mrs. Blondell. I think that's one thing that is super pertinent to me that I've dug into more than I can, more than I should have or should admit, think I want to go to law school at this point in time, is that I keep close the attorney-client privilege and the discussion of attorney-client privilege. With that, I understand that this situation is a very delicate and important situation. And I would recommend, I am going to recommend, obviously this isn't a motion, so I'm going to recommend it to the team, that perhaps we are able to sit down even with our law enforcement to review and say, hey, this is process, this is what happened, this is where, you know, things went this way or that way, without identifying individuals and with making sure that we're maintaining that confidentiality, because I do think this isn't something that I want to act like, you know, nothing happened and let's move on, because it is very serious. But I think that attorney-client privilege and that discussion that comes from, we get emails all the time that are attorney-client privilege, and sometimes they don't come directly from our attorney, but they're still privileged amongst each other, and so that's where my mind's at today. And I think the individual who obviously requested the FOIA redaction should be a part of that discussion, so they fully understand that.
Okay. One more thing I'd like to add is, you know, transparency is important, and I feel like, you know, looking at that, if it's something that is creating distrust or mistrust, and it's pretty simple remedy, and sharing information, that's how I look at it. Because it is important that parents understand that, you know, this administration does take it very seriously, the students' safety, and it could prove that, you know, instead of disproving, it could prove something. So I'm all about that. Thank you.
Any additional discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Gogolewski.
Before I get my answer, I just want to clarify that we are voting for the board to deny the FOIA appeal, which would mean that if we were voting that way, we would say yes. I do not wish to deny the appeal, so I vote no.
Thank you, and you are correct, Mr. Gogolewski. Mrs. Shaw. Sorry.
Yes.
Mrs. Coleman.
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
No.
Mrs. Blondell.
I'm a no.
And I'm a yes. And with that, I will volunteer to sit down in a meeting with that individual. Item 3A, future meetings, October 9th, 2023, 6:30 right here. Hope to see you all. And then November 13th, 6:30, crazy to believe we're almost into full-fledged fall, right here again, for future meetings. Item 3B, any informational items from the team? All right. Hearing none, I do want to let the audience know that we will be hosting a closed session for attorney-client privilege information. There will be no discussion post-closed session or no decisions made post-closed session. So while we certainly have to come back to adjourn, there will be no activity post-adjournment that you guys will miss if you would like to leave. I don't want to keep anyone here thinking that something exciting is coming, because it's not. Other than that, we will then, as a board, go into closed session, and then we, oh, excuse me, sorry, you are correct.
I move that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the board president, enters a closed session to review attorney-client privileged information.
Motion by Mrs. Bowman, support by Mrs. Shaw. Any discussion?
Megan, just so the audience on Zoom land knows, we are gonna be closing down the Zoom because we won't be here. You're not gonna miss anything, as Ms. Layback said. The only purpose to come back will be to adjourn.
Thank you. Mr. Gogolewski.
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw. Yes. Mrs. Bowman. Yes. Mr. Costa.
Yes.
Mr. Keller.
Yes.
Mrs. Blondell.
Yes.
And I'm a yes.